now recognize Mr. Obernolte for his 5 minutes of questioning. I appreciate his patience. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to also thank you for allowing me to wave on. This is a really critically important topic for me. I think the technology that's being developed here is going to dramatically change the world for the better, and I think it's incumbent on us here in Congress to get it right when it comes to regulation. Dr. Koopman, I am really glad that you're here because you said something that really resonated with me. You said that the core issue here is public trust, and I completely agree with you. And I also appreciate the fact that the viewpoint that you're bringing to public trust is one that has to be validated by accident data, which I think is correct. I think that we demonstrate that public trust is merited by the accident data that's generated from the AVs, and so I think it's incumbent on us to gather that data. So I wanted to ask you the state of the data that we have right now. Do we have enough data to reach a conclusion about whether or not the current generation of AVs is safer than human drivers?
We're part of the way there, but we're not all the way there. And it's important to note that data only happens after you've been operating, and if you want public trust, I think you need more than that. You need transparency, accountability, and independent oversight, because in things like the 737 MAX crashes, those were what were compromised in that degraded trust. But to make sure I hit your question, the data we have now is about crashes, but it's not about fatalities. It's about 100 million miles between fatality in round numbers. For the U.S. fleet, there's lots of tailoring you do, but we're talking 100 million miles. These companies have done 1 or 2 or 3 million miles. So it's great that they have a mathematical prediction and estimation. They think they're safe enough. That's fantastic to hear. But it can only be confirmed by that data you're talking about. And okay, 1, 2, 3 million miles of data, that's great. 97 more million miles to go before we get to 100 million to see how it turns out.
Well, what about the current accident rate for level 2 enabled vehicles? Because those have been here for a few years. Do we have any data to compare the accident rate for a vehicle that is being piloted on level 2 compared with one that's human piloted?
That's problematic. The current SGO data that was talked about before, in fact, one of the most important uses that has not been mentioned is for the level 2 vehicles, the autopilot type crashes. We're seeing lots of fatalities, we've seen lots of crashes, but the SGO does not require enough mileage reporting. So we know how many crashes, we don't know how many miles with the feature enabled, so we can't do the division to compare it to human drivers. So that's, there have been studies done, there have been claims made. Most of the claims made have also been debunked. So it's hard to say. What I've seen so far is there is no data showing that automated steering improves safety. It's a convenience feature. There is data showing newer cars are safer, but it's not the automated steering. It's the automatic emergency braking. And really, if I had a limited bucket of money to spend on improving highway safety, I'd spend it on the active safety features, because it's a lot more bang for the buck than fully automated driving.
I think context probably matters too. I mean, it's not, from a non-empirical standpoint, it's hard to imagine that a car on a highway being driven with level 2 technology and a human monitoring is not safer substantially than one that doesn't have that technology available, because you do away with things like distracted driving, you do away with things like drunk driving, falling asleep. But we, like as you say, we don't have the data.
Well, you would think but it's not true. National Transportation Safety Board says that you invoke automation complacency, which counterbalances it. So there's no clear reason why it should be safer. Humans are terrible at supervising automation.
Sure. Well,
they're terrible.
We won't know until we have the data. Mr. Bozzella, in this conversation that Dr. Koopman and I have been having, I mean, we're talking about this issue of public trust, and we already have a perceptual problem, which you brought up in your testimony, with public trust, because we might have tens of thousands of auto accidents across the country in any given day, but if one Tesla on autopilot gets into an accident on the opposite side of the country, it's front page news. So what do we do with this issue of public trust? Because this is not going to go away. This is going to get worse, because we're never, I mean, perfection is the goal here, but we're not going to have perfection. It's always pursued, never achieved.
Yeah.
How do we establish this trust?
Trust is absolutely essential. If the technology is not trusted, we can't produce these benefits. You are 100% right. I want to make sure that we distinguish, however, between automated autonomous vehicle technology that this committee is talking about, which is level 3, 4, 5, and assistance technology, which is level 2, there is a bright line. In every case, on level 2 vehicle, the driver must always be engaged in the driving task. And so there's a significant difference between those two technologies and between those data sets. And unfortunately, I think what it will take with the level 2 technology is a combination of things. Education, but also companies making sure that they express limitations of the technology as well as the benefits, and that we work on things like driver monitoring and human engagement. And that's in the infrastructure bill, for example, that was passed on a bipartisan basis. These are things that we need to continue to work on.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm out of time.
Sorry,
Let
thank
me
you.
let me just point out, though, that, I mean, we need to have a dialogue about the metric. And the metric ought to be, if AVs are substantially safer than a human vehicle, then they are beneficial, regardless of the fact that they will still be causing accidents and fatalities. And that's what we need to communicate to the public. And frankly, I mean, that is a huge barrier, because the public is not going to be receptive to that message.
Agreed.
Anyway, but I will thank everyone for your testimony. I apologize for running over, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
All right.